Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Polk County Board of Commissioners. It is November 23rd. All commissioner attendance and extra agendas are on the back table. Looking for comments on this agenda. Hearing none. Looking for approval of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Approval of minutes from November 9th, 2022.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Approval of consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next up is public safety. Thanks, Sydney. Next up is public safety levy update. Administrator Hanson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is a update before I provide the board with my final recommendation on the public safety levy. We've been meeting as a group with some of the key players in the public safety levy, the sheriff, the district attorney, community corrections, myself, Chair Morris, and Judge Hill. First thing that I handed out to you is the operating levy reauthorization timetable. As you can see, the first thing will be an internal staff recommendation. I will have that ready for you either this coming Wednesday or the following Wednesday. Most likely it'll be next Wednesday. I have the memo pretty much written and what I have in my mind as the recommendation. With that recommendation, you will then have questions and then choose to modify my recommendation or not. The other key dates that we have to have are the BOC public hearing, local option tax. That's February 15th at the latest. And then the board order February 22nd. And that is the last meeting prior to having it delivered to the county clerk. We have to provide the county clerk our information by February 25th. Then she goes through advertising process for public input and modifications. Then if that clears, then we deliver the final measure to her prior to March 16th. And then the election is held on May 16th. So those are the key dates and the last dates that you can do those things. Obviously, the election itself, that is the date. So there is no changing that. So the timetable hasn't changed. Like I said, I will give you my recommendation next week or the following week. That will give you time to either modify at that time or consider having public information forums if desired, or any of those things. And you would probably work with the sheriff and the DA on those public information outreaches if that's the direction you want to go. So, and I can be involved in those basically as a fact type person, but not a promoter of promoting or advocating for passage of the levy. Because then I violate what I'm supposed to be able to do. And Morgan appreciates me not violating that. So the next 3 pages are scenarios. And there's a lot of numbers in there. Morgan did not review this, so they're still accurate. But the scenario number 1 is a levy that would reduce the current levy staffing by 1 in the sheriff's office. That was something we talked about initially. That was to try to ensure that we stayed under 50 cents per thousand. At this level, under scenario 1, there are assumptions that are being made that the assessed value growth is going to average 4%. Currently, the last 4 or 5 years, we've been nearer 5%. But that's not a number that I would want to guarantee or use in my calculations. In the last 20 years, we've been as low as a little less than 2%, and we've been as high as 5.5%. So I picked 4, which is the 3% with a 1% growth range, and really no compression in real market value to assess value. We have a big enough cushion that if real market value comes down, 10, 15%, we still will be going with assessed value. If it crashes like it did in 2008, we'll probably be nearer the 2.5%, 3% growth. So doing the best I can on that assessed value growth. But if we did scenario 1 with one less body in the sheriff's office, we could probably go with a 47.5 cent per thousand rate for that type of levy. I only gave you numbers of 47, 48, 49, but at 47.5 cents, with the understanding that you'll probably reauthorize again in 4 years if this measure is successful, 47.5 cents would probably be the appropriate rate that we would charge with the one less FTE in the sheriff's office, with everything else remaining the same. Scenario.
So before we go on.
Yep.
Can you go back for me? I just got lost in all that fog of the very first paragraph.
Okay.
In here that's describing the costs.
Yep.
So tell me again, maybe you said it and I just fogged over it. What's the rate of growth here that you have projected for the costs?
Increasing each year.
Yeah.
5%. 4 on assessed value,
I got that part.
5 on the cost associated with that. The only one that doesn't apply to that 5% is the juvenile beds and community service number on the right. But I applied that to the DAs and the I write cops because that was just short for me, but public patrol and jail people in the 18 in this case in scenario 1. So
that 5% is just the step increases within
it's just trying to calculate PERS, which is an unknown, trying to calculate cost of living, which is somewhat fixed with the extension that we just did, and health insurance. Who knows what that may be in the future with measure 111 or about measure 111. So I used a number that I'm comfortable with. The other things it assumes is, full staffing and those kind of things. And that's an unknown at this time too. So I'm comfortable with the cost and I'm comfortable at the 4%. So those are the things I used. They didn't change in any scenario except adding bodies. Each scenario gets a little greater in the number of bodies that we have. So
And our projected cost today in this 22-23 line is $3,340,000
yeah, that's about,
For this-
that's what I have budgeted.
for this package. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're looking at
Or that's what it would be if we had one less.
$1.33 million increase over 5 years.
But that's the way it is almost in every levy.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand all the numbers.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what some entities do. They have a different number for each year. I try to pick one number so it's simple to explain, simple to the voters. You tend to make money in the first 2 years. You break even in the third year or try to, and then the fourth year you're losing some, and then by the fifth year you're losing a chunk. And so you have to manage it. But another way to do it would be, I'll just pick 47.5 cents year 1, 48.5 year 2. I mean, just escalate it. That makes it easier maybe to reauthorize in the future because you don't have those big jumps, but it also is difficult
to explain.
It's difficult to explain to the voters and And then they always go, why is my number different? And then you have to explain it every year and those kind of things. So,
We'll sort of check in on these projections every budget cycle.
oh yeah, I would look at it and, if for whatever reason, assessed value somehow is growing at above 5%, you may not have to levy the full amount. If it's growing at less than 4%, we may have to not modify the levy per se, but look at other cost saving measures because my belief is, and it's always been at Polk County, if we go out for a levy, we're going to keep the promise of what the levy's going to do. We would have to look at other things. So that's scenario one. And basically you can look at that and say that's a status quo -1 for the sheriff's office. Scenario number two, a lot of the same numbers. The only difference is this is technically a status quo levy. This is what we reauthorized in 2019. These have the same amount of bodies and pretty much the same everything in scenario number two. And the total cost goes up because there's one additional patrol person in that number. If you look at scenario number two, you can probably either pick 49.5 cents or 50 cents. I would go with 49.5 if we chose to go with scenario two, which is a status quo. And then I would urge that we continue to reauthorize after every 4 years. And at the status quo levy, not losing a body, is where the sheriff let me know he would like to see the levy, at least for staffing for his office. Considering all the dollar values in that, ideally, if you asked him, would he like to have more bodies? He would probably say yes to that. But taking everything into consideration in that, he came back to me with, he would just like to see it stay status quo, at least the levy. And then if there's growth in the general fund and that, add FTE through the natural process rather than through the levy. So scenario two is a status quo budget. You would probably go out before the voters. If you chose to go with that scenario, it would probably be a 49.5 cent levy, which is a 7 cent increase over our current levy, but stays under the 50 cent number that we've talked about before. And then the final one is scenario three. The question was asked in our mini committee meeting, what would be ideal for your office? And the district attorney came back with 3 additional DAs and 3 additional support staff. So you would see the number up above where it says DAs, it goes from 5 to 11. To do that, you would probably have to increase your levy to 59 cents per thousand. You might be able to get by at 58.5 cents per thousand, but it's somewhere up there in a number that is probably unrealistic for you to propose to the voters and probably unrealistic to get passed, but I don't know. I mean, that's a decision that I will make my recommendation, but you're the final decision maker on that. The other concern I have is right now it's very difficult for us to fill the existing staff in the DA's office. Just giving him 3 and 3 on paper doesn't mean he has additional staff. So, and I'll talk to him and that, but my guess is I would tell him that, I'm looking more at a status quo budget or levy, and that, once you have you're fully staffed for 6 months or a year, then we can consider looking at expanding that through a natural process through the general fund. And you should have better information to prove that. So But those were the three scenarios that were discussed at the committee level. Obviously, I'm probably leaning towards scenario 2, which is the status quo public safety levy. And if you ask me to make a recommendation right this second, I would say go at 49.5 cents per thousand, go at a 5-year levy, and do it this May election of 23. But I wasn't ready to do that right at this moment.
Just curious why in scenario 3, we would just theoretically up the FTE for DA. And not,
Because that's what he requested in the ideal.
this is just a request. Okay.
Yeah.
The DA. Okay.
Yeah, I'm only going, I went with the sheriff's request, which was status quo. That's scenario 2.
Gotcha.
And the DA, and I think he did it in his last presentation, that he would want 2 or 3 additional DAs and support staff. So I put it at the max. Obviously, if you lowered it to 2 and 2, you're probably going to save 1.5 to 2 cents. Every time it ratchets down, it's probably 2 cents or a little more. And when you add the 5% to it, it starts exploding a little more and makes it a little more difficult. So those were the scenarios. Those were what the 2 main departments that are part of our public safety levy. Those were their 2 differences. Like I said, if I were making a recommendation to the board today, it would probably be going with scenario 2 at 49.5 cents per thousand. That's a status quo budget or status quo levy. FTE don't go up, don't increase or decrease. And I think we're pretty close to the right number there. You do have population increases and that, but there are a lot of unknowns for this particular levy. You gotta have a new PERS increase probably before we go out for this. We probably will get those numbers maybe near the end of December. That may make me modify some things. My understanding is that rate won't increase as much as normal, but that's when they were having good times in the stock market, and they may be looking at this current year, even though that's not part of their assessment, and modify that a little and not kick the can down the road with PERS. Like I said, we're in pretty good shape with the labor unions and that. We kind of know our number there, at least for the next 4 years. So that's positive. So there won't be a lot of decrease from there. But those are my best guess, and their educated guesses on costs associated both with the personnel and the levy, and then my best guess on guessing where the assessed value growth is going to be. So if you have questions or more questions, I'll be happy to answer. If you want more information when I present to the board, I can do that too. I can put together almost anything you want. When we originally passed this, we passed it in May of 15. I think it was about 56 to 43. I think we only had 2 precincts back then that didn't pass it. I won't name those precincts, but it was, it was close in those 2 precincts. And then in the others, there were some big margins of positive yes votes to no votes. We even were a little wider spread on the reauthorization. I unfortunately, when I had those numbers and then I saved over the top of those, so I can get those if you want to see how it was the last reauthorization, but it was even more healthy. I think in that one, we only had 1 precinct that didn't vote in favor out of the 18 that we have or 16 that we have. So, but I can provide any additional information that you want. And like I said, essentially my recommendation in my head is pretty much in place. I just want to make sure and run numbers, talk to the assessor one more time and those kind of things.
the increase from the DAs, from Mr. Felton, that came from Judge Hill's comment during our levy meeting, where he said if this was the perfect world and Polk County deserves to have a premium public safety forum with their sheriff's department, full capacity in the DA, what would be your dream number of what your department would look like? And then that's where that 3 more DAs came from. And at that time, I think Mark said he used a couple more officers, but at the same time, Sheriff Carton came back and said, you know, if we can maintain what we have, we're doing a good job and we're meeting our needs. So, but
yeah. So yeah, the DAs is an ideal number. The sheriff's is, in my opinion, a more realistic number. Ideal, if I said, here are 3 more deputies, he would say, thank you. And we would move on and he would assign those to, you know, different areas.
Fully trained and committed for 20 years of service.
But, you know, and I think DA Felton took Judge Hill's comments to heart with an ideal. I don't think he's expecting anything like that.
and he did wish to be here, but he is
In trial.
handling in trial right now, so he's in court.
Look at, I killed the audience.
Those questions, what is the ideal scenario are kind of sleep. The voters. I think this is really the ultimate question, but I don't, you know. So, yeah.
So when I make my recommendation, I take all those things. Obviously, the DA's office isn't my department, the sheriff's office isn't my department, but I'm trying to balance what I believe the voters would be willing to support, along with still being fiscally responsible and keeping our staffing at least meets the needs of our public safety. And currently, I think if we were fully staffed everywhere, it would probably be meeting the needs. When you're understaffed, it makes it tougher on your existing personnel, but I can't control that. Sheriff can't control that. DA can't. And I don't want to have a levy that, you know, we pass on to the voters. We can't fill those numbers. Then we're actually overcharging the voters for the service that we're asking for. So again, those are the wheels that go on in my head, and that's why my recommendation may not make the elected officials that are benefiting from the levy completely happy, but that's my recommendation. Again, the final decision is up to the board. And obviously input from the sheriff, input from the DA, very important.
So for the record, how much money, what is the total dollar out of our general fund that goes to operate?
Well, if you just look at the general fund is about $34 million. And about 2/3 of our general fund is made up of the sheriff's department and its related functions, dog control, marine patrol, and the two biggie, the patrol and the jail. And then it also is made up of the DA and their programs, which include prosecution, victims assistant, medical examiner, and support enforcement. Support enforcement is 2/3 funded by the feds, so they aren't even part of this, but it's the DA's office as a whole, and so those go for prosecution and support staff with prosecution, the levy people. And then the other portions of criminal justice is community corrections and community service. 2/3 of your general fund, so if we're 33 million, that'd be 23 million altogether that we put into And I also include juvenile in that, the transfer to the juvenile department in that too, because they benefit from a detention bed in this levy. So this levy doesn't come close to covering the cost of those programs. We're going to generate approximately 4 million and we're putting in 22 million. So we utilize a majority of our general fund property tax rate in supporting these programs also. Some of these programs generate some money. Community corrections is almost completely funded by the state. Sometimes in jeopardy or not, depending on the funding cycle and those kind of things and who's in control on that. So, but this is a small but necessary portion of our general fund and our public safety system. When we didn't have this levy, we were on a collision course to having very poor public safety system because we didn't have the funds to cover, 24-hour patrol. We didn't have the ability to do a lot of the things that we were used to. And that's one of the reasons that we passed the public safety levy. And at that time, he said this was not just a one-time levy, that to maintain this level of service, our permanent tax rate isn't adequate enough to do that, and that we would be coming back for this type of reauthorization almost every 4 or 5 years, because we just don't have the capability unless the state allows for modification to the most likely never. So this isn't new. This shouldn't surprise the voters. Obviously, it was their first time being here. It might, but we have never ever stated that we're one and done or two and done. In this case, we will be seeking the third round of the public safety levy.
I'll go on record. I support maintaining the status quo with the 49.5 cents.
I haven't recommended it fully yet. So
So Sheriff Garden, you've done a great job. Right now, you're facing a lot of things we weren't facing even 5 years ago with all of the illegal grows. And make sure that we have a proactive sheriff's department, not a reactive. So we can keep them down to a minimum and do what we can to control that quality of life in our parks and our communities. How many officers does this levy represent?
A status quo would be 19 FTE. I believe it's 14 in patrol, 4 in the jail, and 1 CT. Is that? Yeah. But not all deputies in the jail. 1 was a CT when we originally put it together. So that's what a status quo. If we went with scenario 1, which is 1 less, it would be 1 less in patrol. And in the DA side, it was 3 district attorneys and 2 support staff. And then really not any bodies in the other little small element. It was a detention bed and some money for community service. And
I'm not talking about my position on the record. It's inappropriate. It's not time.
It's time to reflect.
if there is additional information, visual information you want, just let me know and I'll provide that when I give you my full recommendation. You'll see the scenario sheets again in my recommendation and those kind of things. But like I said, if I had to recommend right now and you said, what do you want to go with? I would say the 49.5 cent status quo levy.
And do we have a need for an executive session today?
Oh, sir.